Is more. Modernism is called minimalist because think of it, you take away the decoration, you celebrate the structure, skeleton skin, and space that's it. Now you know there's a documentary on Mies van der Rohe, it's called Regular or Super. You know why? One of the last projects Mies ever did was a gas station, a modernist gas station in Canada.
Sirens all day long.
Now, not all the modernists were crazy about squares. Look at the Marina City Towers by Bertrand Goldberg. Goldberg was a student of Mies van der Rohe, but he felt Box's psychological slums assert. Now, these early steel frame buildings coming out of Chicago would become known as the Chicago School of Architecture. Father of Chicago School, Louis Sullivan, describing it thusly: your building should be like a Greek column, a tripartite division of base, shaft, and capital, every inch a proud and soaring thing. The Chicago School would influence the birthplace of modernism, the Bauhaus, which was the prairie states in west and down to New Orleans. 1848, the Illinois-Michigan Canal is completed. Chicago becomes a boom town. By 1890, 1 million people here. But we're a city that went to work too young. We grew up too fast. 1 million people, and at that time being hog butchered to the world, with the Union Stockton Ship Canal off the South Branch so deep that using gravity as an aid, they caused the river you're traveling on to flow backwards away from the lake. And so we save our drinking water Lake Michigan, and we send the pollution south to St. Louis, Missouri instead. And that's how the river still travels today. Apologies to my friends from St. Louis. Look to your right, see the building with the antenna now, friends. That is Big John, the John Hancock Center, the 4th tallest building in Chicago, 1,127 feet, 100 stories, and a prime example of modernism. You saw all the... Now friends, London has Big Ben, and Paris its Eiffel Tower. Chicago's answer on the right, the clock tower of the one and only Wrigley Building, commissioned indeed by chewing gum king William Wrigley Jr., who as a young man had gone to Burnham's Bowles Arts Fair. He brought that style downtown. Now the clock tower of the Wrigley Building was modeled after the Spanish Renaissance, the 11th century Giralda Tower in Seville in Spain. And you know what? I'll take the temple portion at the top of the Wrigley Building back further to 3003 BC. That was inspired by the Temple of Socrates. And on our right, like a Gothic cathedral, Tribune Tower, home to the Chicago Tribune newspaper. 1922. Colonel McCormick of the Tribune offered $100,000 in the design contest for the most beautiful office building in the world. Housen of New York win, inspired by the Gothic cathedrals of France and Belgium. The very first Chicagoan, the French-speaking fur trader from Haiti, Jean-Baptiste Pontus Sabo, who started a fur trading empire right in front of the Tribune Tower area. That was way back in 1779. Look to your right, we have the new 2nd tallest building in Chicago. This is Trump International Hotel and Tower. Adrian Smith, architect. Yes, New York financier and fading TV reality star Donald Trump has blessed us, if you will, with a 92-story, 1,125-foot building. Although 2 feet shorter than the John Hancock Center, this building gets to list as taller because of the spire on the roof. The Council on Tall Buildings in the Urban Habitat, not a Monty Python comedy sketch, but the group that rates the tall buildings in the world. They say spires should count as height because they're part of your design. That takes the building up to 1,362 feet. Let's return to the Beaux Arts tradition. Look at the building with a beautiful issue. This was prohibition. Alcohol illegal, but Chicago has never been dry. You could find a drink during prohibition right below that dome, for that was the Stratosphere Lounge, the speakeasy where the bootlegger Al Capone was hanging out. And on our right, this black box, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe's final American commission, the former IBM building. Mies is known for the phrase, less is more. Modernism is called minimalist because think of it, you take away the decoration, you celebrate the structure, skeleton skin, and space that's it. Now you know there's a documentary on Mies van der Rohe, it's called Regular or Super. You know why? One of the last projects Mies ever did was a gas station, a modernist gas station in Canada.
Sirens all day long.
Now, not all the modernists were crazy about squares. Look at the Marina City Towers by Bertrand Goldberg. Goldberg was a student of Mies van der Rohe, but he felt Box's psychological slums asserted the middle class kept leaving Chicago for the suburbs. Goldberg was working to reverse that trend because, my friends, if you do not have a strong middle class, you'll never have a great city. And Goldberg realized many people would stay downtown if you offered them 24-hour urban living. Now this step back now, my friends, though, to 1913. The red brick building with a clock tower on the right is the Reed Murdoch Center by George Niemans. Niemans was actually associated with the Prairie School of Architecture. Prairie School Architects. They kind of evoke our rather flat Midwestern landscape. Their design's horizon-hugging balance by the clock tower. Now, if you count the arched bays on, you know, the streamlined look of Art Deco began with an exhibition in Paris, France, 1925. Chicago's Merchandise Mart, 4.2 million square feet of rentable space. You are looking at the largest structure in America prior to completion of the Pentagon. There are 4,000 windows, 7 miles of hallways. They had to give that building its own zip code.
7 miles.
The Merchandise Mart was commissioned by the Marshall Field Department Store of Chicago as a giant wholesale market. $32 million. But alas, that never was realized for the Field Company because the Great Depression hit, and by 1945 they had to let the building go for back taxes. Who could afford it and make it work back then? But Joseph P. Kennedy, Lonely Planet, giving you good insider tips. Here's an insider tip. In front of the Bauhaus Sun-Times newspaper right here, they're about to build 3 giant condominium projects, which means this might be the trip you want to go to that Holiday Inn, who might lose their view within a year. You see right above the Sun-Times letters? That's a little lounge open to the public called Cityscape. That's a great place to have a snack and a cocktail and look out over the river at sunset. Now, this area we're in right here is called Wolf Point. This was the beginning of Chicago where everyone first settled. The confluence of the South Branch behind you, North Branch in front of us. And where they're gathered in 1833. They took a vote. It was 12 against 1 to incorporate. Thus, on March 4th, 1837, Chicago, place of the stinking onions, officially became Chicago the city. Now we'll tour the North Branch of the river. This is still a working industrial river, undergoing a residential renaissance. Look at this older building on the left. This is Harry Weiss's 1981 Fulton House. See how thick the walls are? This building was built in 1898 as a refrigerated warehouse for 70 years. Before Harry could turn it into condos, he had to spend a year deep. So who discovers elite? Who else? A cable guy. The cable guy is using it to lay cable, about the only person that might even venture into those tunnels. In January of 1992, you know, about 6 months after the construction, he looks up, Chicago River water is leaking on his head. I imagine. The Boeing Building, Perkins & Will, 1990, Ralph Johnson architect. Postmodern, it leans with this high clock tower towards the European modernist look. Now, the original client for this building was the salt company founded right here in Chicago, Morton Salt. Remember Morton Salt? When it rains, it pours. Now, this is an air rights project. It is literally built on stilts over operating train tracks. The railroads own all the prime riverfront land in downtown Chicago. Now, you do realize, of course, with 3,000 miles of railroad tracks, that also made Chicago the hobo capital of the world in the early 1900s. Madison Street used to be called Hobohemia, a working-class intellectual district of hobos, artists, anarchists, and the Wobblies, the industrial workers of the world, fighting for that one big union. They got an education. When Dr. Ben Reitman protested, we were passing Gateway Center. This is an air rights project surrounding Union Station. Now, chronologically, you have a textbook picture of going from the 60s architecture, the 70s, the white building, the 80s, the mirror building. Stylistically, we'd say we have that pure Misesian glass box modernism there, using Mises' name as adjective, international school postmodernism. But look across the plaza, see that older neoclassical building, Chicago's Sears Tower, block the sun with the palm of your hand, wave at the people in the sky deck on the 103rd floor. You know they can see you because it features a glass floor. Enter it, man, you're 103 floors up and you're walking on air. If you suffer from a fear of heights, vertigo, man, you're 103 floors up, you'll be heaving in the air. Don't look down. Now, 3 years ago, London-based insurance company, the Willis Group, took over 3 floors of the 110-story Sears Tower, and they renamed the entire building the Willis Tower. I honor the new name. Those mail-order houses, we would build a giant post office. Chicago is the great American city of exaggeration. Do something big, we'll give you the tall buildings in the urban habitat. We call an antenna simply an add-on. Only spires count as height because they're actually part of the design. Now, the construction technique of the Sears Tower is called the bundle tube system. Think of the building like a bundle of sticks wrapped together for string. 9 contiguous tubes, each 75 foot square. Now ascending, you'll see the main commodities traded at the Chicago Board of Trade. That building is from 1930. Now look at the annex from 1980. World-class architect from Germany, Helmut Jahn, who had come here originally to